What's going on, programmers? I'm back here today to tell y'all a little bit about the random math class, and I'm going to talk to you about the math class in general as a whole. So I've already set up my project and have my first class in here. So this program will demonstrate how the random class is used and also other random class methods that can be used. This program will show random generators, both seeded and unseeded. Alright, so to use the random class, obviously you've got to import it. So you can do import java.util.random. Alright, just like we do java.util.scanner to get our scanner, we just import random. As always, you could just do an import of the wildcard, which is the star, and then it'll import all of it. I just wanted to show you both so that you could remember. So I've got my class called Random Math, and I also have my main method set up. So what I want to do is actually create a random generator. And let's see, unseeded random generator. Alright, so I'm going to explain in a minute what seeded and unseeded means. Alright, so all you got to type is random and then give it a name. So I'm just going to call it random gen. Alright, equals new random. Alright, so now we have a random generator. So this allows us to generate random numbers. Alright, I will now create a variable in it, and I'm just going to call it rand1. Alright, so it's my first random number. And the way you use this random generator is you write the name of it, and then you do dot next int. Alright, because we are storing inside of an int, we have to use next int. If we wanted to use a double here, we'd have to do next double. Alright, so this is how you would get a random integer. So just to show you that this works, I'm going to have a print statement to print out our random number. Alright, so it was named rand1. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and leave a comment here. Use random generator to store in variable rand1. Alright. So now if I run this and I click run, I get a lot of random numbers that aren't necessarily what I want. Alright? It's because I haven't specified an actual I guess length that I want. So I want to random gen an integer, and I'm going to put 10 inside of here. So let's see what that does. So when I run now I get 5. Okay, that's, I'm trying to get from 0 to 10 here. So now I've got 5, 7, 8, 8, 5, 1, 2, 1, 7, 8. So I'm not seeing 10. Oh, there's 0. So I'm not seeing 10. Let's see if I get 9. There's a 9. Okay, so it looks like this 10 just means 10 numbers and it starts with 0. So I'm going from 0 to 9 right now. So if I wanted to get to 10, I'd have to add a 1, right? So what I'm saying is from 0 to 9 and then I add 1. So if this generated a 6, I add 1 and now I have a 7. Alright, so that's fairly easy. So this is what we call unseeded, because every time I run the program, it's going to give me a different random number. Alright, we also have something called a seeded. Alright, and seeded means that the generator generates one random number, and then every time you run the program, it's always going to be the same number. Alright, so we put a random factor in at the beginning, and that indicates it helps it decide what random number is generated, and then that same number is always generated because you've given it a seeded point. Alright, so the way we create a seeded random generator, I'm going to call this seeded gen. Alright, nothing different, right? The only difference is we put a number in here. So I'm going to put a 5. Alright, doesn't really matter. Alright, so I'm going to store my seeded random number in an int. Alright, that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to have no, I'm going to call it seeded 1. Alright, equals random. Nope, I named it seeded gen. Alright, dot next int. Cool, right? So let's try to print this out. So print out our seeded random number. Seeded 1. Alright, I may have made a mistake here, so let's just run this to see what happens, then I can explain the mistake. Alright, so again, just like I did the first time, right? I did not indicate a range within my random number generation, so it just gives me a random number. But notice it's always the same random number, and that's because we've seeded it with this 0.5. Alright, so I need to go back up here and enter a range. So let's do 0 to 10 again, right? So when I generate, now I get 2 and 7. I'm going to add a nice little string here and say unseeded. And then here I'm going to say seeded just to make it more clear. Alright, so now when I run this, I see that my unseeded is 9 and my seeded is 7. So I run it again, I get 5 and 7. So my unseeded changes and my seeded always stays the same. The only way I can get the seeded to change is if I go up here and I change that fixed point we started with, and now I get 3 every time, and then I could change it to 100 and I get 5 every time. Alright? So if you need one random number that's always going to stay the same, you want to use seeded. If you want unseeded, which is where every time you run the generation it changes, then you would do it this way. So these are the, I guess, 2 ways to use the random class to you create a random generator and generate random numbers. So just to kind of show you a little more on the ranges, what if I wanted to do, I want to generate a random number from 100 to 1000. Alright? Well, I'm going to just do an unseeded, so I'm going to use the random gen versus the seeded gen. Alright? So what I have to decide is, on this side, how do I have to manipulate this so I can get the range of 100 to 1000, right? So what I can do is put 901 in here. Alright, so that'll give me from 0 to 901. Alright, so if I add 100 to it, it'll now give me from 100 to 1000. Alright, so if I generate, I'm not printing it, so let's call this ran2. So that way I can see. So 641,972. So I'm actually able to generate numbers between 100 and 1000. Alright, so you'll have to figure out your manipulations to get the range you need for your random numbers, but other than that, it's pretty simple. And this is math.random in Java.